This book is not intended as a polemic for which it's much too late anyway. It might be something of a cenotaph or catacomb, since it contains the skulls of vast numbers of people who lived and died in Paris but would be unlikely to find a home there nowadays. Instead, I mean it mostly as a reminder of what life was like in cities when they were as vivid and savage and uncontrollable as they were for many centuries, as expressed by Paris, the most sublime of the world's great cities. Life was, of course, not all fun and games. The expression of every sort of behavior inevitably included a great deal that was unpleasant, if not inimical and even murderous. It was a city composed of myriad small undertakings, momentary decisions, fluctuations of enthusiasm, accommodations to fortune, which accrued and weathered and developed a patina and were built on top of and next to and around in an endless process of layering. Even now, the layout of streets in some parts of town derives from ancient and forgotten circumstances, some course of water or farmer's field or half-whimsical decision made in the Middle Ages or even earlier, and over time this curve and that angle, having no evident logical sense, developed, as it were, personalities. They colored the ideas and habits of those who lived on the street or used it every day, allowed for dark corners in which dark thoughts could be stored, and created off-kilter rhythms that prevented monotony. And then those subtle turns and nudges slowly and invisibly engendered all sorts of things: beauty, curiosity, ambition, skepticism, discontent. Until not so long ago, it was always possible to find a place in the city. There were cheap neighborhoods, and failing that, there were places to roost, to hide away, places left unattended long enough to allow squatting and repurposing. Until not long ago, except in the most extreme circumstances, there existed the option for those who wanted it badly enough to thumb one's nose at the directives of fashion and progress and authority and carve out an eccentric path of one's own. This more so in Paris than anywhere else, because there willful eccentricity was respected if not necessarily understood. Perhaps that remains an option, but has been driven indoors, out of the social realm, and is progressively more difficult to pursue as the controlling interests of society have become ever more adept at shape-shifting and assuming the semblance of forces once opposed to them. Nowadays, anarchy means conformity. Rebellion means compliance. Revolution is the seasonal rotation of dry goods. And freedom is the exercise of license by the powerful. Perhaps under the circumstances, it's asking too much to continue to believe, or at least hope, that the stubborn and perverse human capacity for disobedience will prevail in the end, the way worms can undermine a wall. But for now, that's all we have. And then this other thing I'm going to read is chosen primarily because it's the most kind of self-contained part of the book. In the early years of the 20th century, the anarchists hunkered down. They only rarely put up posters anymore that they claimed had been printed by the Imprimerie Nationale or the Ministry of State, but they still organized house moves à la cloche de bois, to skip out, literally by the wooden bell. They still held their meetings on the cheap by walking in on meetings of other political groups and simply hijacking the podium. But now the anarchists were younger, more ragtag, more personally troubled, less in public view, less grounded in tradition. Until his early death in 1908, their most visible spokesman was a man who called himself Albert Libertad, an orphan whom early illness had left with withered legs and who propelled himself on 2 crutches, which he could use as formidable battering instruments. He was generally accompanied by the sisters Hermaldine and Anna Mae, both of them his lovers, one or both of them the mothers of his sons, Minus and Diamant. He was a cynic, bitterly sarcastic, famous for haranguing priests in the pulpit during services at the Sacré-Cœur. Among his followers, according to an early adherent, quote, "You found every sort, very studious quasi-intellectuals, poets, and also, necessarily, informants and provocateurs. And then there were the scientific types, confirmed in their ignorance, smart Alecs always on the hunt for some scheme. They were attempting to refashion the rules of life from its essential principles. Most were vegetarians, even vegans, végétaliens, and drank only water. They read Darwin and Huxley and sought a scientific rationale for an ideal existence freed from unthinking adherence to social norms." Quote, "The autonomous social cell bows to no law and no prejudice. The right to life justifies everything. The lives of others are no longer sacred for us. Only what matters to our eye can have any value in our eyes. If in order to survive I have to crush thousands of troglodytes, I'll do it with no remorse. If we have to cut down everything that surrounds us, let's not hesitate. As Émile Henry put it, there are no innocent victims. Let's hit hard. Let's be strong. That is the true moral law of life, as biology teaches us. That's how to be a real revolutionary, nothing to do with the mystical and redundant babble of the workerist charlatans. It's galling to think that with no knowledge of anatomy or astronomy, nor psychology, nor zoology, nor embryology, idiots presume to address the social question. There was always, on every issue, someone with a more radical stance. If it was agreed that marriage was legalized prostitution and the family an incubator of misery, someone might say, cohabitation, that's our worst enemy. It can't be engaged in without compromises and consequent servitude. Anarchism must give the social cell, the individual, complete autonomy. It would be idle to abolish marriage only to substitute for it a bond that is equally as servile for all that it isn't legalized. At the communal house in suburban Romainville, where the editorial offices of L'Anarchie were located, a sign on the door to the library read, "Idlers, crooks, drunks, stinkers, climbers, snobs, hysterics, eggheads, gas bags of every description, do not pass through this door. Death awaits you." Painted on the library wall was a motto, "If you want to live, be your own best friend." It was from this milieu that the Bonneau gang emerged. It was a misnomer from the start. Jules Bonneau was an excellent driver. He was a professional chauffeur who'd driven Arthur Conan Doyle and the prolific true crime hack H. Ashton Wolfe, among others, so he was a known quantity the press could latch onto, and he was also, at 35, by far the oldest, but he was really only a driver. The rest were all young working-class autodidacts, quite a number of them orphans, all of them laboring since age 12 or 13. Édouard Carouille, 28, a Belgian, had worked in a sugar refinery. Octave Garnier, 22, from Fontainebleau, was a baker. René Vallet, 21, from Verdun, was a locksmith and typesetter. Audrey Soudy, 19, from near Orléans, was a grocery clerk. Eugène Dieudonné, 27, was a carpenter's apprentice from Nancy. Raymond Calmet, 21, called Raymond La Science, was a typesetter from Brussels. Élie Monnier, 22, called Cimentoff, was a peasant from the Pyrénées-Orientales. On December 11, 1911, a bank messenger was making his way down Rue Ordinaire in Montmartre, north of the hill, to the local branch of the Société Générale, carrying a bag containing 318,722 francs in securities and another bag with 5,266 francs in coins, while in an inner pocket of his coat a wallet held 20,000 francs in banknotes and a bit of gold. He wore the uniform of his trade, a sky blue frock coat and a Napoleon hat. A car stopped and a man got out. Without a word, he shot the messenger twice and grabbed his bags, while the second man went through the messenger's pockets. The automobile took off. It was the world's first getaway car. The car was found abandoned the following day in Dieppe on the coast. As soon as the news hit the press, the bandits were seen everywhere in Europe, but at first no one thought of the anarchists, although many lived just up the hill from the robbery. 2 days after the New Year, a 91-year-old rentier and his housekeeper were found murdered in the southeastern suburbs. Around 20,000 francs in securities and gold pieces were missing. Witnesses in the neighborhood who were shown photographs identified Garnier, and after his name appeared in the newspapers, the bank messenger who had survived also pegged him. In addition, he claimed to identify Dieudonné, who was irrefutably in Nancy on December 21st. The police tossed the Romainville house and arrested everybody there, then let everybody go, except Rirette Maître Jean, 24, and Viktor Lvovich Kibalchich, 21, despite the fact that they had no demonstrable connection with the case. Meanwhile, a crime wave had broken out. There were car thefts and robberies of stores, post offices, factories, and armories all over France and Belgium. The police were objects of widespread ridicule. On February 28th, a car running down Rue d'Amsterdam almost hit a bus, knocked over a woman, then was blocked by the bus and had to stop. A traffic cop, who happened to also be named Garnier, started writing a ticket, but the car took off with him clinging to the running board. He was shot 3 times from inside the car and died soon after. The police, in hot pursuit, hit a pedestrian and had to stop. The car vanished. Eyewitnesses identified the shooter as Garnier and the driver as Bonneau, with Calment in the back. A wave of arrests swept up Dieudonné. Garnier wrote an open letter to the newspapers, taking responsibility and clearing him. A month later, 6 of the gang stole a car and killed the driver, then drove to Chantilly and raided the Société Générale. The employees resisted. 1 was killed. The bandits emptied the coffers to the tune of 47,555 francs. A witness pegged Soudy. Hysteria ensued, with denunciations and false leads galore. The prosecutor received as many as 700 letters a day. 13 associates of the gang were indicted. Soudy was arrested in a coastal town, Carouille in the suburbs, Calment in Paris, loaded down with 3 Brownings. Bonneau got away from the cops once, and then, on April 22nd, was tracked down to a garage in Choisy-le-Roi in the southeastern suburbs. The police, who didn't know he was alone, called in reinforcements. Firemen, 2 companies of the Garde Républicaine, a cordon of volunteer sharpshooters. Taking in the scene were the Attorney General, a party of judges and VIPs, and a film crew from Pâté. The house was soon riddled with bullets, but Bonneau kept firing, so the police dragged in a cart loaded with explosives. After an initial misfire, there followed 2 explosions. Somehow the house was still standing, although there was no sign of life from within. The cops broke in, shielding themselves with mattresses, and found the mortally wounded Bonneau, also wrapped in mattresses. According to legends, he shot at them, although by that time he'd put 2 bullets in his head. He died on the way to his on his way to the hospital. A piece of paper was found in which he exonerated Dieudonné and 4 other people. It said that he died exclaiming, "Dieudonné is innocent." Newspapers pointed out that Bonneau alone, equipped with just 1 revolver with a 50-foot range, his other arm paralyzed from a wound received in his previous encounter with the police, had managed to hold at bay an army equipped with Lebel rifles and dynamite. The arch-Catholic Léo Blois wrote, "The newspapers are full of heroes. Everybody was heroic except Bonneau. The entire population, flouting laws, took up arms and fired away while shielding themselves. I confess that all my sympathy goes to the desperado giving his life in order to scare them, and I think that God will judge them more harshly." A few days later, Garnier and Vallet were tracked to the eastern suburb of Nogent-sur-Marne, to a house in a densely populated area. Gendarmes, firemen, and Republican guards surrounded the house, while Zouaves stood on the viaduct above and rolled boulders down, aiming at the house. As firemen fired from surrounding rooftops and bombs were thrown to no effect, spectators showed up, some in evening dress, some with picnic baskets. The gun battle went on for hours. Sometime after midnight, a huge explosion shook the house, and when the wall of smoke cleared, Garnier and Vallée were found dead in a pool of blood. In 1947, Léo Mallet wrote a novel, La vie est dégueulasse, which means life sucks, that featured a character loosely modeled on Garnier. As a teenage runaway, Mallet had been taken in by veterans of the Romainville commune, acquaintances of the gang, who in the 1920s ran a vegan cooperative on Rue de Tolbiac. His character, Jean Frégé, a member of a revolutionary gang inspired by the teachings of a sinister oracle called Christ, is on the run from the police following a motorized caper. Along the way, he's met and fallen in love with Gloria, who doesn't know his true identity. He's itchy and paranoid as well as jealous. Disturbed by Gloria's periodic absences, he follows her to the house of friends. The husband of the couple is a psychoanalyst who notes Frégé's anxieties and persuades him to unburden himself serially. During their second session, the women rush in from an adjoining room. The newspapers have reported that one of Frégé's comrades has given him up. Frégé takes out his revolver and holds the three captive, while the analyst coolly continues the session. "There's your penis," he says, pointing to the gun. "Your life has been nothing but one long, artful suicide." Twitching, unsure if he'll kill the others or kill himself, Frégé says, "I would so much have liked to live," and rushes out. 2 weeks later, he bursts into a precinct house, on the point of death from starvation, but waving his gun and begging the cops to shoot him in the crotch. They oblige. 8 months elapsed before the surviving gang members went on trial. Carouille, Calmin, Soudy, Monnier, Dieudonné, Maître Jean, Kibalchich, and 7 other people faced charges ranging from murder to receiving stolen property and harboring fugitives. During their time in the Santé, 7 of the bandits were examined by Émile Michon, the prison psychologist, who questioned them on every possible topic. In the resulting book, with its improbably lovely title, A Little of the Bandit's Soul, he never identifies them by name, with the sole exception of Kibalchich, because I will never be able to consider him an evildoer. The result being that they become a blurry mass, bugs in a jar. Still, Michon's ambivalences add up to a convincing group portrait. They intellectualized their emotions. They were so invested in their I that they were often ignorant of the most basic facts about others. They were ascetics even in matters of the heart. They had excellent memories. Most of them could lecture endlessly on Spinoza, Lamarck, Schopenhauer, the sciences. They were slobs. Quote, "They seem to attach themselves to nothing, and they dread all discipline, even that of habit. They are inconstant in every sense of the word. They come and go, move, travel, or always leaving someone. When they arrive somewhere, they go away again almost immediately. They settle nowhere. Since they're always wanted for some infraction or violation, they change names as easily as they change addresses, and they sleep with one eye open." Extrapolating a bit from his account, you can figure that Monnier, from the Midi, was the warmest and most passionate, Raymond Lascience cold and pedantic, Carouille was stolid and slow, Dieudonné earnest and deliberate. Michon refers to only one of them as a psychopath, by process of elimination that would leave Soudy, who had himself photographed aiming a rifle at the camera. Before even being sentenced, Carouille had bit down on a cyanide capsule he'd obtained somehow. 7, including Rirette Maître Jean and the 2 other women, were acquitted. 3 were sentenced to prison terms, including Kibalchich, who served his 5 years, then changed his name to Victor Serge. He fought in revolutions in Spain and Russia, was among the first to warn the West about Stalin, wrote extraordinary books. Dieudonné, despite all the efforts to exonerate him, was sentenced to death, and then the sentence was commuted to life in the penal colony. Soudy, Calment, and Monnier all married the widow, which is to say that they went to the guillotine. On his way, Monnier said, "Farewell to you all, gentlemen, and to society as well." Calment said, "It's a beautiful sight, isn't it, a man who's about to die?" Soudy said, "Brr, it's cold." Calment and Monnier left their bodies to science, Monnier to surgical anatomy, Calment to biochemical research. His disembodied hands remain preserved in formaldehyde at the Medico-Legal Institute in Lille. Soudy left his brain to the dean of the medical faculty at the University of Paris, his burglary tools to the Ministry of War, his skull to the Museum of Anthropology that would be exhibited and the profits given to soup kitchens, his hair for the Barbers' Union to sell to benefit the cause, and his autograph to l'anarchie so that priests and apostles of philosophy can use it to further their cynical individualism. Instead, he was buried in Ivry. Thank you.